clearly, you don't need me to tell you that brands are rushing to enter the metaverse to begin to experiment with NFTs.
The metaverse is the future for brands that want to stay relevant. We know that digital fashion inside the metaverse is going to be absolutely huge.
Of course, they should look into the open metaverse and also join the kind of fight we are all trying to have against the closed metaverse.
Already, like the way that brands are approaching us now today versus the way they have been approaching us in the past has already shifted.
So let's kind of jump in. Kadeen, I'm going to start with you. So what is the opportunity? How do you frame the opportunity? Why should people care? I know you've been having this conversation with brands pre-Facebook Meta. As I said, I refuse to call them Meta, but like Facebook Meta. How have you been framing that? Why have brands been exploring this with you? Why should they care?
Well, it's a great question, Jamie, and one that we've obviously been doing a lot of thinking around. The metaverse is the future for brands that want to stay relevant. We know that digital fashion inside the metaverse is going to be absolutely huge. So are our digital identities, and brands have understood that the metaverse deserves their attention. In the last 18 months here at Yahoo, we've launched an integrated XR studio in central London, which specialises in 3D virtual production, including motion capture, mixed reality broadcasting. You've been into our studio, Jamie, you've seen it a couple of times now. We've also built a volumetric capture stage to add to our photogrammetry rig. We've hosted a VR fashion show, a virtual Halloween escape room, a global AR scavenger hunt, and we recently...
Metafest, you did Metafest, right, in December?
I was just going to come to that. We recently dropped a virtual concert for the singer-songwriter Nina Nesbitt, who performed as an avatar, Ready Player Me avatar, in a crypto music event called the Metaverse Festival inside the Centraland. She was also rocking artifact sneakers, as was I at the festival. And, we supercharge experiences for the metaverse using creative technology and immersive production to produce next-gen content in verse across multiple platforms and devices. And we reach audiences at scale all over the world as part of our media ecosystem, including Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Movies, Yahoo Entertainment, and Yahoo Esports. So we really see the metaverse as the future of the internet, and we're really excited about the opportunity that this presents to brands.
Well, you've sold it to me. Maybe I should start thinking about this metaverse stuff. So Benoit, why should people have a different understanding of the metaverse? Obviously, Zuckerberg's got his. I imagine a lot of brands you see doing activations and things like Roblox, and as far as they're concerned, that's the metaverse, as much as they might think that Fortnite is. We obviously collectively in this little panel here subscribe to this concept of a more open metaverse, maybe the open metaverse. Why should brands choose to engage with the open metaverse rather than these closed environments and NFTs specifically, despite all the friction that they come with today?
Already I think it's very good that they engage with Fortnite and Roblox, and what you see coming out these days is stuff they've been, I think, planning since the COVID started, some of them a bit earlier, but most of them really woke up to video games in general only, a year and a half ago. So you need to take that into consideration. Lots of these brands are really big, they are very slow, they have their core business is doing really well, and they focus on their core business of the physical side of the business. So I think it's really good already that a lot of them, open their eyes to video games and are starting to get serious. Some of them did that as a one-off, and then other ones are really understanding that it's big. And then suddenly they all got shocked by the metaverse and NFT space we've all been doing hardcore, for the past year. I would say it really started to really, get public knowledge in a sense. And it just takes time for them to, I think, look at it. But I think they need to look at both sides, right? But now that Facebook really announced the meta stuff and their thing, I think it's going to be a lot easier for brands to work with Facebook and what Facebook is doing, because it's an actor they've been dealing and spending a lot of money on for years already with Facebook ads and all the social media wave that also took the brands by surprise, 10 years ago. So I just think it's going to take quite a bit of time. And of course, they should look into the open metaverse and also join the kind of fight we are all trying to have against the closed metaverse. Because if we have them on our side, it's just going to make that fight, make us stronger for that fight. But I just think that it's going to take a bit of a time for them to really understand and think that this is a core subject for them they want to fight on, because they have to fight still on the video game and all the other stuff they were late fighting on, in a sense. So that's my blurred answer for you.
But do you think that it's also like, so of course, on the one hand, they want reach, right? And clearly in the closed metaverse, there's the audience there, ready and waiting, looking for content, easy to activate. But is it that cool to be doing things?
They think it's cool because they get PR from it, so that's what the problem with these brands is that they are very big and organized in different departments. So they each have their own objective and people behind it want to have a promotion or stuff like that, right? So it's not 100% purely dedicated strategy towards, okay, do I want to be there in 50 years? I need to start to be serious now. But at the same time, it's quite hard for them to work with people like us because, us, we don't have an account manager, we don't have this type of things, right? Whereas with the normal actors I used to deal with, like Facebook, they have already a process they know to follow and, it's legal, like all of this is done. So it's just a bit hard. That's why if we do stuff with big brands, you always need to make sure you do the best you can so that it's not scaring them off from that and they just go fully on the Facebook side. That's a complicated subject.
No, I mean, and of course that is the problem, right? If you want to engage with, if you want to be an early adopter of like edge technologies or edge culture, then that brings friction, right? There's not really the support infrastructure to onboard you as a brand.
No, but just like there was friction as well, when social media came up, they were afraid to do Facebook pages. They all took a very long time as well to try to get on TikTok or try to do TikTok properly. So just like any new type of medium, it's always very hard for companies or brands that are built in a different world, in a sense, to come on that world. So
yeah, I mean, for my sins, I remember being the first person to bring Facebook into WPP in Europe.
There you go. You're part of the devil. Yeah,
I know, it's my fault. Yeah,
WPP as well.
Three salespeople. It was hilarious. So Seb, you built a platform. I think you mentioned, was it 250 brands you've worked with now?
200 already.
Wow, that's insane. I was trying to reconcile that in my head. Is it 20 or 200? Okay, 200. So you clearly built a platform that allows for you to engage with brands at scale. And when I say brands, as you mentioned, Snoop, for example, a partner at Outlier just joined in your intake. So he's a brand, but he's not, doesn't have the scale of an Adidas. It's, somebody with a management team, a very small core team. How should brands approach working with different worlds, or I prefer to call them verses, but let's just call them, worlds or virtual environments?
Well, I think already the way that brands are approaching us now today versus the way they have been approaching us in the past has already shifted since we've seen over the last 30 days, a great increase of interest about metaverse that translated into peaks of research over Google, etc. They used to look at the different virtual worlds or platform based on what already exists into them, and they kind of follow their followers. They see one example, they say, oh, we want to do the same. It's very rare brands that are really trendsetters and are going to redefine themselves into what does it mean for ourselves to be into a metaverse, or to let our community, our fan, own digital asset, own NFTs from ourselves, use them for their avatar, use them to create their own games, such as into the user-generated content game maker of Sandbox, and so on. And most brands, until very recently, they were looking through the spectrum of what's decentralized virtual world, only through Somnium Space or Decentraland, which had a great way to run events or to introduce VR, but was less gaming oriented. And what Benoit was just mentioning before, it's already great when brand looks at Roblox or Fortnite to engage with a younger audience, with a different kind of audience than the traditional customer into the physical world. Now with Sandbox, we've seen that shift. They understand better the value of letting their community engage through user-generated content, creating their own stories, adventure games, and it can all start just with our game maker. Actually, it doesn't need yet to go through NFT first. Like just having the possibility to create stories, to own land, and that the land ownership is actually a really strong piece now for those brands. Like most of them, they engage with us. We want to have land. That's interesting. That's a very interesting perspective on like how they are approaching virtual world.
On this tab, I think it's also because they are used to know, they understand real estate, right?
Yeah.
And need retail. So that's something that they understand from the physical world that can translate very well to Sandbox and think, okay, I want a great piece of real estate next, in a premium area. So that's something that is easy for them to understand. I think that's why they start by land. Yeah.
So exactly, but that's also been a shift of like how we've been building over the past 3 years and trying to approach the brand. Like sometimes we approach them with a UGC, sometimes we approach them just with getting land. But ultimately, what matters is like what value, what experience, because the metaverse is all about experience. They want to live to their community, and they want to do that over not just a one-time thing, but over a long time, because they want this presence to stay and to continuously. Like NFT and the metaverse is like a new channel for them to engage with their community. They're turning community fans not just into a customer relation, not transactional, but more like to really more of like a closer relation with less intermediary and with like more transparency.
So Luis, I don't want to kind of show either your or my age. I mean, I alluded to the fact that I'm old enough to have done the cardinal sin of inviting Facebook into the world of advertising. But how analogous is this from a brand perspective with Web2 and social media? In introducing brands into the context of Web3, going from something which perhaps they outsource to developing internal competencies. What's analogous about your experience as somebody who's a similar age to me as we're now seeing with Web3 and brands?
I think the most basic analogy is, so right now everything is happening almost off the rails, right? People are doing things, they're playing in different worlds, but the full rails of Web3 are still being built. And as they start to come forward and it becomes standardized, it'll operate a bit more like a SaaS, but with a bit more service. I think I guess the best analogy is in 2008, I remember people saying, well, why do I want to be on Twitter and share what I had for breakfast? Because that's what Twitter was about. And the equivalent now is like $200,000 for a JPEG. So there's this lack of understanding of what's happening right now. So part of what we're doing is we're looking at the beginning, like what's the strategy for the long term? How can they engage fans? How can they do a drop? After they do a drop, how can they activate it in the real world? So there's a big learning curve for brands to come on board, and you're tempted to want to like do the whole thing for them, but we're focusing on the marketplace, for example, the drops, and then with a companion app so that they could activate it in the real world. And there are about 4 or 5 use cases that we're using there. So we have to simplify and get it down to a couple of use cases, just like with social back in 2008. It was, once brand pages were a normal thing, there was that, and then they did promotions on top of it, and there was like 5 or 6 things you could stack. So we're trying to get to that level here with brands, where we give them a basic stack with a community NFT. They can manage them, and then they can do some activation in the real world. There's hundreds of things that can come on top of that, but we're trying to get a basic stack so that we're not having 10 conversations that lead nowhere.